All right, so picture this. It's 2025. You wake up, grab your coffee, and want to see what's happening in the world.
Yeah.
You open up Google News, that app, the one that gathers all those headlines, personalized just for you.
Right.
But for our deep dive today, we're looking at a specific snapshot of Google News headlines from February 14th, 2025.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like we're time travelers peeking into the future, through these news stories.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And the cool thing is we're not just passively reading these headlines. We're
Right.
going to dissect them, find the trends, what do they tell us about the world at that moment?
Yeah, and I have a feeling you're the perfect person to help us with this.
Well, I'll do my best.
Okay, so let's jump in.
Let's do it.
The first thing that jumps out, Donald Trump is everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
2025, he hasn't been president for years, but his name is all over these news stories.
It really shows how some people, even after they leave office, can still hold a lot of influence. Makes you wonder, what is it about Trump that keeps him, in the spotlight? Is it personality, his policies? What is it?
Yeah, let's look closer. One headline says, Trump elected chairman of the Kennedy Center.
Wow.
The Kennedy Center, that's a huge deal for the arts. Kind of a head-scratcher, isn't it?
It is. It really makes you think, what does this mean for the Kennedy Center's, direction going forward? It seems to suggest a shift maybe towards a more, populist kind of approach to the arts.
Mm-hmm.
You got to wonder what made the Kennedy Center choose Trump. Was it strategic? Did they want to shake things up, maybe appeal to a different audience, a wider audience?
Yeah.
I mean, this kind of move could really change things, not just for the arts, but beyond.
It definitely raises a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And just when you think it can't get any more surprising, another headline pops up. Trump and Putin discuss ending the war in Ukraine. Years after it started, what's going on here? Is this some kind of secret diplomacy?
It's definitely interesting. It raises some really big questions about what role former presidents should have in international affairs, right? Especially when it comes to, things like ongoing conflicts.
Yeah.
What kind of influence does Trump even have on Putin at this point? And what does this mean for U.S. foreign policy and, all the efforts to end the war in Ukraine? It's a lot to unpack.
It really does feel like we're watching a geopolitical chess match.
Yeah.
And then there's this headline. Trump and Modi meeting focuses on trade. Modi, the Prime Minister of India. So it seems Trump is still very much interested in global trade.
It does, yeah. This meeting with Modi, they're talking about a tariff gift. It makes you think, is Trump trying to position himself, as a big player in global trade, even without, being president?
Yeah, it's interesting. So we're seeing two sides of Trump in these headlines, right? On one hand, he's involved in diplomacy, world affairs,
Yeah.
trying to have an impact. But then there's this other side.
Yeah, there's definitely this thread of him focusing on, his key issues, even outside of office. And immigration seems to still be a big one for him.
Right. There are headlines about more deportation, stricter immigration policies.
Yeah.
I mean, these are really complicated issues that people are still debating.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a reminder that politics are constantly changing and, people can still have a lot of influence even without holding office.
And it also speaks to the lasting impact of certain policies and ideas. Even years later, these issues are still shaping the political conversation, impacting people's lives.
It's like we're seeing the long-term consequences of decisions made years ago.
Exactly.
So we've got Trump at the center of a lot of these headlines.
Yeah.
But there's another story that I noticed. It feels different. It says, dozens injured as driver crashes car into Munich protest.
Oh, wow.
This happened right before that big security conference, the Munich Security Conference, right?
Yeah, the Munich Security Conference, that's a big one. World leaders, experts, everyone comes together to talk about, global security challenges.
Right.
The timing of this car crash, though, that's concerning. Was it intentional or was it, a terrible accident? And how does it connect to the conference? It's hard to say.
Yeah, that's what's so unsettling. Makes you think about the state of, global security.
For sure.
Are we seeing more attacks like this? Is this a sign of, rising tensions, political polarization, or something else entirely?
It really highlights how vulnerable public gatherings are and the importance of security, in today's world. It makes you think about why this happened and what it says about, the bigger picture, the socio-political climate.
Yeah.
It's tough.
It really is.
Yeah, it's a crack on this idea of global security.
Mhm.
It might seem isolated, but it shows these underlying tensions.
Right. It's a stark reminder that these issues haven't gone away, even in 2025. So we've got Trump, we've got international relations, trade deals, and now this unsettling thing in Munich. You're really good at connecting the dots. What do you think? What's the big theme here? What are these headlines trying to tell us about the world in 2025?
Well, one thing that's clear is that the past keeps shaping the present.
Right.
Trump being all over the news, even years after his presidency, shows how some people can have a really long-lasting impact on, global affairs. Makes you think, how do these past events and these individuals, how do they keep influencing what happens today?
It is like we're seeing the echoes of those events playing out.
Exactly. And these headlines also show how interconnected the world really is.
Yeah.
The news about Trump talking with Putin and Modi, the trade talks, even that incident in Munich, they all point to this web of relationships and events, things that shape reality. What happens in one place can have these unexpected consequences somewhere else.
It's like that butterfly effect thing, right?
Exactly. One small action, huge impact somewhere else. And I think that's important for anyone trying to understand the news.
Right.
We're not just watching from the sidelines. We're all connected. And what individuals and countries do can have these far-reaching effects.
Yeah, that's a good point. So if we were to step back, look at this snapshot of February 14, 2025. What would be our main takeaway? What's the headline?
I'd say the headline is that we live in a world where the past and the present are constantly mixing,
Okay.
where individuals can have surprising power, and where events that seem isolated might actually be connected in ways we don't expect. It's complex and, unpredictable.
It is a lot to take in, but that's what makes this so fascinating. We're not just skimming the surface, right? We're trying to understand these forces that are shaping the world.
Right, and it's important to remember that these headlines, they're just a glimpse into one day. There's always more to the story, more perspectives, more things happening that aren't even in these headlines.
Yeah, it's like we're looking at a puzzle, but we only have a few pieces.
Exactly, and it's up to us to keep looking for those missing pieces, find different sources of information, and really think critically about the news we consume.
So we've traveled to February 14th, 2025, and explored a snapshot of that day's news. We've seen how past figures continue to have influence, how global events are all connected, and how even one day's news can reveal these complex trends.
Yeah, and I want to leave you with this thought. While these headlines show the influence of people like Donald Trump, it's also important to pay attention to the quieter stories, the ones that might not make the front page but could still have a big impact on our future.
That's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in the drama of the news cycle, but sometimes the most important stuff is happening under the radar. So next time you're scrolling through your newsfeed, remember to look beyond the headlines. Think critically and ask yourself, what's the real story here? How does it connect to the bigger picture? That's something to think about until our next deep dive. Yeah, it really makes you think about how much is going on that we don't even see.
Right, we focus on the big names, the big events, but there's always a deeper story there.
So how do we actually get to those deeper stories? How do we make sure we're getting the whole picture?
Well, that's where critical thinking comes in. You got to ask questions, challenge assumptions, find different perspectives.
Yeah.
Don't just take the headlines at face value, right? Look deeper, explore different sources, try to understand the motivations and the context behind the news.
We need to be like detectives of the news, almost
Yeah.
piecing together the clues to find the truth.
Exactly. And you have to be aware of bias, your own bias, the bias in the media. You're always evaluating the information.
Right.
And remember, the news is never truly objective.
Right.
It's always shaped by who's reporting it, by the algorithms, by whose voices are being heard, Being aware of those things helps us understand the information better.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into February 14, 2025, it's clear that staying informed is a constant process.
Right.
It's not enough to just read headlines.
Yeah.
We have to engage with the news, ask questions, and try to really understand what's shaping our world.
And that's what makes it so interesting, right? The world is full of these amazing stories, these complex connections. By being curious and thinking critically, we can all become more informed and engaged.
It's been a really thought-provoking look into the future of news. So until our next deep dive, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep looking beyond those headlines.